Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The marketplace buzzed with life. Winding his way through the narrow aisles between stalls, Adam found himself swept up in the chaotic energy of the place. Vendors called out their wares in a cacophony of voices, haggling with customers in animated exchanges that seemed more like theatrical performances than business transactions. Distracted by the sensory overload, Adam failed to notice a low-hanging awning. He ducked at the last second, stumbling sideways into a nearby stall. His elbow caught the edge of a display, sending an array of colorful scarves cascading to the ground in a silken waterfall. "Oh no! I'm so sorry!" he exclaimed, dropping to his knees to gather up the fallen merchandise. In his haste, he became entangled in one particularly vibrant scarf, a riot of blues and purples that seemed to have a mind of its own. The more he struggled to extricate himself, the more thoroughly it wrapped around his neck and shoulders. A gentle hand touched his arm, and Adam looked up to see a woman regarding him with kind eyes and an amused smile. Her own head was wrapped in an elegant hijab, and she wore the traditional dress of the region. "Here, let me help you with that," she offered in accented English. "These can be tricky if you're not used to them." Flustered and embarrassed, Adam nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I'm making a real mess of things here." The woman's deft fingers worked quickly, untangling the scarf and then draping it artfully around Adam's neck and shoulders. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Much better. It suits you." Adam opened his mouth to explain that he hadn't actually intended to buy the scarf, but before he could speak, the stall owner appeared. The man's initial look of annoyance melted into a broad smile as he took in Adam's appearance. "Ah, excellent choice," he exclaimed. "That color brings out your eyes beautifully. Would you like to see how it looks?" Before Adam could protest, the vendor produced a small mirror from beneath the counter. Caught off guard, Adam found himself peering at his reflection. The scarf did look rather striking, he had to admit. The deep blues and purples complemented his complexion in a way he never would have expected. Thank you," Adam stammered, reaching for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" As he paid for the scarf, Adam became aware of the interested glances from other shoppers. A group of women nearby were whispering and smiling in his direction. One of them approached, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Excuse me," she said, "but I couldn't help noticing your scarf. It's absolutely lovely. Are you here on vacation?" Adam nodded, still a bit bewildered by the turn of events. "Yes, I'm just exploring the market." The woman clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, wonderful! You must come with us then. We're about to visit the local hammam. It's a traditional bathhouse. Women only, of course, but it's an experience not to be missed." Adam's eyes widened in alarm. "Oh, I don't think—" But his protests were drowned out as the woman linked her arm through his and began to steer him through the crowd. "Don't be shy, dear. It's perfectly safe and so relaxing. You'll love it." As they wove through the market, Adam found himself swept along in a whirlwind of feminine energy. The women chattered excitedly around him, pointing out various stalls and offering recommendations for local delicacies and souvenirs. "Oh, look at those beautiful kohl pencils!" one of the women exclaimed, tugging Adam towards a cosmetics stall. "You simply must try one. They'll make your eyes pop even more with that gorgeous scarf." Before he knew it, Adam found himself seated on a low stool as the vendor demonstrated the application of the kohl. The cool touch of the pencil around his eyes was strange, but not unpleasant. When the vendor held up a mirror, Adam barely recognized himself. The dark lines accentuated his eyes, giving them a mysterious, alluring quality. "Stunning!" The women chorused. "You look like a desert princess!" Adam's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but he couldn't help feeling a small thrill at the transformation. It was as if he'd stepped into another person's life, one filled with new experiences and perspectives he'd never considered before. As they continued through the market, more and more vendors seemed drawn to their group. A jewelry seller insisted on draping Adam's wrists with jingling bangles, while another offered a selection of delicate floral-scented oils. "For your skin, lovely lady," the perfume vendor explained, "to keep it soft in this dry climate." Adam found himself nodding along, accepting each new addition to his ensemble with a mix of bemusement and growing curiosity. The weight of the bangles on his wrists, the soft swish of the scarf against his neck, the lingering scent of jasmine from the oil, it all combined to create a sensory experience unlike anything he'd known before. The group paused at a stall selling traditional clothing, and Adam's new friends insisted he try on a flowing abaya. The long, loose garment enveloped him in soft fabric, instantly transforming his silhouette into something more graceful and feminine. "Oh, it's perfect!" one of the women exclaimed. "You must wear it to the hammam. It's much more appropriate than those Western clothes." Adam opened his mouth to object, to finally explain the misunderstanding, but something stopped him. There was a freedom in this unexpected masquerade, a chance to see the world from an entirely different perspective. And wasn't that why he'd come traveling in the first place? To broaden his horizons and challenge his preconceptions? With a deep breath, Adam made a decision. He would embrace this unexpected adventure, at least for a little while. What harm could come from it? "All right," he said, his voice soft and tentative. "I'll wear it." The women cheered, hugging him and patting his back in approval. As they made their way towards the hammam, Adam felt a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. He had no idea what to expect, but he was determined to make the most of this unique opportunity. The hammam was housed in an ancient stone building, its entrance marked by an intricately carved wooden door. Steam wafted out as they stepped inside, enveloping them in a warm, moist embrace. The reception area was cool and dim, with mosaic tiles lining the walls and floor. An older woman greeted them, her weathered face creasing into a welcoming smile. She spoke rapidly in the local language, gesturing towards a row of lockers along one wall. "She says to undress and wrap yourself in one of the towels," one of Adam's companions translated. "Then we'll go into the steam room." Adam froze, panic rising in his chest. Undress? He couldn't possibly. But the other women were already moving towards the lockers, chatting and laughing as they began to disrobe. There was an easy camaraderie among them, a comfortable intimacy that made Adam feel both envious and terribly out of place. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. The woman who had first invited him placed a comforting hand on his arm.
"It's all right to be nervous, especially if it's your first time, but I promise there's nothing to fear. We're all women here, and the hammam is a place of healing and community." Adam swallowed hard, his mind racing. He could confess the truth now, but that would mean embarrassing not only himself, but also these kind women who had welcomed him so warmly. And a part of him, a part he was only just beginning to acknowledge, was intensely curious about what lay beyond that steam-filled doorway. "Okay,"
he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try." With trembling hands, Adam made his way to an empty locker. He turned his back to the room, taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart. When he turned back to face the room, he was surprised to find that no one was paying him any particular attention. The women moved about with easy confidence, their bodies of all shapes and sizes on display without shame or self-consciousness. "Ready?" his new friend asked, appearing at his side.
"Let's go in together."
Adam nodded, unable to trust his voice. They stepped through the doorway into a world of steam and shadow. The air was thick and hot, heavy with the scent of eucalyptus and other herbs. Low stone benches lined the walls, and in the center of the room was a large, raised platform.
"Sit here,"
his companion instructed, guiding him to one of the benches. "Just relax and let the steam do its work. When you're ready, one of the attendants will come to scrub and massage you." Adam sank onto the bench, the heat immediately seeping into his muscles. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breath as he'd learned in yoga classes back home. Gradually, he felt the tension begin to leave his body. The sounds of soft conversation and running water created a soothing ambience, and Adam found himself drifting into a state of deep relaxation. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when a gentle touch on his shoulder roused him. An attendant stood before him, gesturing for him to lie on the central platform. Adam complied, his movements slow and languid from the heat. The scrubbing began. The attendant used a rough mitt to exfoliate every inch of his skin, sloughing away dead cells and impurities. It was almost painful at first, but as the process continued, Adam found himself enjoying the invigorating feel of it. As he lay there, drifting in a haze of steam, Adam found his mind wandering to unexpected places. He thought about the ease with which these women inhabited their bodies, the lack of self-consciousness they displayed. He thought about the way they had welcomed him without question, offering friendship and inclusion to a stranger. And he thought about himself, about the parts of his identity he'd always taken for granted, and the new possibilities that this strange adventure was opening up. What did it mean to be a man or a woman? How much of our sense of self is shaped by the expectations of others? Adam sat up slowly, feeling as if he'd been transformed on some fundamental level. His skin tingled, his muscles felt loose and relaxed, and his mind was clearer than it had been in years. As he made his way back to the changing area, Adam caught sight of himself in a mirror. His hair was damp and tousled, his skin glowing from the scrub. The kohl around his eyes had smudged slightly, giving him a sultry, mysterious look. For a moment, he hardly recognized himself, and yet, paradoxically, he felt more authentically himself than he ever had before.
"How do you feel?"
his friend asked, appearing at his side. Adam turned to her with a genuine smile.
"Amazing,"
he said softly. "Thank you for bringing me here. It's been eye-opening." She beamed at him, clearly pleased. "I'm so glad. Now get dressed and we'll go for some mint tea. There's a lovely cafe just around the corner." As Adam slipped the abaya back on, he felt a newfound appreciation for the garment. The soft fabric against his freshly scrubbed skin was a sensual pleasure, and the way it moved as he walked gave him a sense of grace he'd never experienced before. They left the hammam and stepped back into the bustling streets of the market. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a golden light, and the air was filled with the mingled scents of spices, flowers, and grilling meat. The cafe was a small, colorful space tucked away down a narrow alley. Vibrant cushions lined low benches, and delicate metalwork lanterns hung from the ceiling. As they settled onto the cushions, a waiter appeared with a tray of steaming glasses filled with fragrant mint tea. Adam took a sip, savoring the sweet, refreshing taste. He looked around at the women who had become his unexpected companions for the day. They chattered happily, discussing their experiences at the hammam and making plans for the evening ahead. "Will you join us for dinner?" one of them asked Adam. "There's a wonderful restaurant that does traditional cuisine." You haven't really experienced our culture until you've tried the local food." Adam hesitated for a moment. He thought about his original plans for the day, wandering the market alone, maybe finding a tourist-friendly bar for a drink in the evening. It all seemed so bland and superficial compared to the rich experiences he'd had in just a few short hours. "I'd love to," he said, surprising himself with his enthusiasm. "Thank you for including me." As the conversation flowed around him, Adam found himself opening up more and more. He shared stories from his travels, careful to edit out any details that might give away his true identity. In return, the women regaled him with tales of their own lives, their families, their work, their dreams and aspirations. Adam was struck by how universal so many of their experiences were. They talked about the pressures of balancing career and family, the challenges of navigating relationships, the struggle to find one's place in a rapidly changing world. Despite the cultural differences, there was a common thread of humanity that connected them all. As the shadows lengthened and the call to prayer echoed through the streets, the group made their way to the restaurant. The scent of grilling meat and aromatic spices filled the air, making Adam's mouth water in anticipation. They were seated at a low table, cushions arranged around it for seating. Adam watched in fascination as dishes were brought out. Steaming tagines filled with tender meat and vegetables, fluffy couscous studded with dried fruits and nuts, fresh salads bright with herbs and lemon. "You must try this," one of the women said, spooning some of the tagine onto Adam's plate.
"It's lamb with prunes and almonds, a local specialty."
Adam took a bite, closing his eyes in pleasure as the flavors exploded on his tongue. The meat was fall-apart tender, the sauce rich and complex with a perfect balance of sweet and savory.
"It's incredible,"
he said, reaching for another bite. The meal progressed leisurely, with much laughter and conversation. Adam found himself relaxing more and more, the initial awkwardness of his situation fading away. He was no longer playing a role but simply existing in the moment, enjoying the company and the experience for what it was. As the plates were cleared away and tiny cups of strong coffee were brought out, Adam felt a pang of sadness. The day was coming to an end, and with it, this unexpected adventure. Soon, he would have to return to his hotel, to his regular clothes, and his regular life.
"Thank you all so much,"
he said, looking around the table.
This has been, well, it's been one of the most extraordinary days of my life."
The women smiled warmly, reaching out to pat his hand or squeeze his shoulder.
"We're so glad you joined us," one of them said. "It's always a pleasure to share our culture with visitors who are truly interested in understanding it."
As they left the restaurant and began to say their goodbyes, Adam felt a mix of emotions washing over him. There was gratitude for the experiences he'd had, for the warmth and generosity these women had shown him. There was a sense of liberation, of having stepped outside the boundaries of his usual self and discovered new aspects of his identity. But there was also a twinge of guilt. These women had welcomed him so openly, sharing their lives and their culture with what they believed to be a fellow woman. Did his deception, however unintentional it had begun, somehow taint the genuineness of the connections he'd made? As he hugged each of the women goodbye, Adam wrestled with whether he should reveal the truth. But in the end, he decided against it. What would it accomplish, other than to potentially embarrass everyone involved? The experiences he'd had, the insights he'd gained, those were real, regardless of the circumstances that had led to them. With a final wave, Adam watched as the women disappeared into the crowded street. He stood there for a moment, the weight of the day settling over him. Then, with a deep breath, he began to make his way back to his hotel. The streets were quieter now, the frenetic energy of the day giving way to a more subdued evening atmosphere. Cafes spilled warm light onto the sidewalks, and the air was filled with the mingled scents of shisha smoke and night-blooming jasmine. As he walked, Adam found his mind racing with thoughts and questions. How would this day change him? What would he take away from this unexpected immersion into a world so different from his own? He thought about the easy camaraderie he'd witnessed among the women, the way they supported and uplifted each other. He thought about the hammam and how it had challenged his notions of body image and privacy. He thought about the scarf that still draped around his neck, a tangible reminder of how a small accident could lead to such a transformative experience. When he reached his hotel, Adam paused in the lobby, suddenly reluctant to return to his room and shed the trappings of his day-long masquerade. But he knew he couldn't maintain the illusion forever. With a sigh, he made his way to the elevator. In the privacy of his room, Adam slowly began to remove the items he'd accumulated throughout the day. He carefully folded the abaya, setting it aside with a mix of reverence and regret. The bangles jangled as he slipped them off his wrists, and he placed them gently on the nightstand. Finally, he stood before the mirror and began to remove the kohl from around his eyes. As the last traces of the makeup disappeared, Adam stared at his reflection. On the surface, he looked like the same person who had set out that morning for a day of sightseeing. But something in his eyes had changed. There was a depth there, a new understanding that hadn't existed before. Adam picked up the scarf, the catalyst for this entire adventure, and ran it through his fingers. The silk was cool and smooth, the colors as vibrant as they had been in the market. On impulse, he draped it around his neck once more, admiring the way it looked against his now familiar clothes.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!